The Witch in the Garita. Horror stories. When I had to do military service, I remember that I was sent to a battalion that was in a municipality very close to the city where I lived. It was a generally quiet place, the population was small, and it was very hot, even at night. We were almost always assigned to surveillance or patrolling duties, but I especially remember the nights when we had to be in a Garita, which is what we call the watchtowers that are in places like barracks or battalions. It was a not very big place, built with brick. It had a bathroom, a small thermos where we kept coffee for the night shift, and on the outside around it, there was a space that surrounded it, like a kind of balcony where I used to go out at night when I started to feel very sleepy or during the day, to avoid the heat that was inside. One night when I was supposed to be on watch, I fell asleep. No one would have found out if it hadn't been for the fact that in the early morning, the superiors sometimes decided to go to check if whoever had the shift at the Garita was attentive to their work. They never passed by at the same time. And just that night, they passed by just a few minutes after I fell asleep, so I received a reprimand. One less weekend of leave and a whole week of day shifts was changed to night shifts, plus an additional physical training, normal things of doing military service. So for the next few nights that I had to be on watch in the tower, I tried at all costs not to fall asleep. I would stay inside for a while and then go outside so that the cold of the night would keep me awake, and also something we sometimes did with my buddies, without the superiors noticing, to put a little bit of brandy in the coffee. And I must admit that after a week of the incident, there was a night when I might have overdone it a little bit. So I found myself once again inside the Garita, about to fall asleep because of the effect of the alcohol. But by some miracle, when I nodded off, I almost fell out of my chair, and this put me on alert. I got up and went outside to try to keep my eyes open. I remember that night the moon was full. It looked huge and yellow. Everything was silent when I noticed that a very tall tree, as tall as the Garita, but it was several meters away from there. I could not recognize what kind of bird it was. At first, I thought it was a pimp, but much larger. It had an abnormally long neck, but because of the darkness of the night and the distance, I could not distinguish it clearly. I was watching it when from one moment to another, it jumped from the top of the tree and opened its wings that were also huge. I saw it rise with the moon in the background until it landed behind some not very tall bushes. I waited for a few seconds, trying to make out where the animal was. I heard a sound like a kind of buzzing, and suddenly I saw that from the bushes came out a woman half-dressed. I could not see her face, and I do not think she would have noticed my presence. At that moment, one of my superiors called me. He was behind me. He had come up to see that I was doing my job. He asked me if I was alert that night, and if I had seen any strange movement. I preferred to tell him that everything was fine because after the sanction they had given me, I did not want them to think that I was going crazy. The next day, while we were eating, I told what I had seen to two of my colleagues. They laughed as expected. They made jokes about how the confinement was affecting me. Who knows what else I was putting in the coffee. In the end, I also ended up laughing with them and went on with my life as if nothing had happened. I spent several nights observing the tree where I thought I had seen the bird, but I never saw it again. I tried to forget the event until one afternoon, one of my companions, to whom I had told my story, told me that someone else had witnessed the same thing I had. He had even said that the bird made a buzzing noise just before falling and transforming into a woman. From that moment on, we began to believe that there was a witch that transformed in front of the Garita, but we were still not sure why she did it in that place, nor did we know how often she did it, or if she had a special date to transform. But from that moment on, we began to pay more attention to what happened at night, not out of fear but out of curiosity. The witch in La Garita. The witch in the Garita. Horror stories. When I had to do military service, I remember that I was sent to a battalion that was in a municipality very close to the city where I lived. One morning, when another colleague arrived from his shift at the Garita, he told us that he had also seen her. He was from that town where we were. He was convinced that she was a witch, because when he was a child, his grandmother told him that in that town lived some witches who could transform into birds. They said that they returned at different times because many years ago the inhabitants had caught one of them. They almost burned her alive. They almost burned her alive because they blamed her for having damaged some crops and killed several animals. But in the end, the woman had escaped, and since then they were not seen very often. They only appeared to make bad jokes or take the cattle. At least that was what they said. Then my partner mentioned that the most impressive thing had been to see the bird in contrast with the full moon. And at that moment, it occurred to me that the witch only transformed when the moon acquired that form, which seemed to everyone to be true. That weekend, I was given permission to go out, so I traveled to my city, which was only a couple of hours away. I was able to spend time with my mom and my girlfriend, who I don't know why I decided to tell her about the witch of La Garita, and to my surprise, she thought it was quite strange. She told me that she didn't think I was a superstitious man. She didn't seem very convinced. She didn't believe in any of that. She thought people just made it up to scare children and the gullible. So I had the idea to promise her that the next time we met, I would have proof that the witch was real. After returning from that leave, every night I looked at how the moon was. I had planned to record the transformation with my phone. When the full moon finally arrived, I was determined. I looked at almost every moment towards the tree where I had seen her the last time. I went out a couple of times, but even when I was inside the sentry box, I did not take my eyes off the place. Although of course I also watched the security of the battalion because I had to do my job. Then, while I was inside drinking some coffee, I saw it. The long-necked bird was perched on the top of the tree. I grabbed my phone and went outside to get a better view. But when I started recording while outside, I realized it was no longer there. Suddenly, I heard the buzzing sound and a kind of high-pitched scream, but this time I heard it very close. I turned to see where it came from and I saw it. It was just a few steps away from me, standing on the railing of the tower. Its legs were like a woman's, but ended in claws like an eagle's. It had gray and black feathers. Its neck was abnormally long. Its neck was abnormally long. It had a long neck. Its neck was abnormally long. It had a long neck. Its neck was abnormally long. Its neck was abnormally long. Its neck was abnormally long. Longer than that of a human being, and its face was terrifying. Its eyes were completely black, like two holes. Its eyelashes were long. It had no nose. Its lips were thin. It was not a face similar to any being I had seen until then. I remember it stood there for several seconds while smiling. Then it opened its wings and made a noise that paralyzed me. I felt a stab of pain from the top of my head, and I fell to the ground. The animal flew towards me. It hurt my hands with its claws and smashed my phone. I had to have 5 stitches in the upper part of my wrist. My uniform was all torn. I had to explain to my superior that a bird had attacked me. But to my surprise, he knew what being I was talking about. It was not the first time that the soldiers said they saw that woman who turned into a strange animal, but few times she had attacked someone. Apparently, the witch had been annoyed by my intention to record her. I also received a reprimand because my superior said I had been away from my work and had exposed me to an unnecessary risk. I thought that everything would end there, but the following months, although I did not go back to mess with the witch, I began to notice that some nights I woke up with bruises on my body. Then it was not only me. My colleagues also had those marks, and at other times I came to feel that there was someone pressing my chest while I slept. When this happened, I tried to move, but I was completely paralyzed and heard the horrible screech that the bird had made that night. I would like to tell you that we were able to do something to make the marks and these paralysis disappear. But thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world.